Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 21 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm flying solo today as my illustrious co-host, Mark Henry Jr., is unavailable for this Week 8 review. But don't worry, we've got a great show lined up for you guys, a little bit of a different show. Up first, we have a pre-recorded conversation with Mark Schofield of USA Today. If you have never listened to Mark before, you're in for a treat. He's one of the best QB analysts out there. And so Dibes and I got a chance to sit down and talk with Mark about the first half of the Eagles season, what he's seen from Jalen Hurts, from Nick Sirianni, and what he expects moving forward in the back half of the season. And so I'm going to roll that conversation for you. I will be back on the back end to briefly break down the Eagles game against the Lions and talk about the NFL slate as a whole. And so if you're not interested in the Eagles chat at the beginning with Mark, you can feel free to skip to about the 28-minute mark of this podcast. But I would encourage you, even if you're not an Eagles person, stick around. Mark has some great knowledge, and he's going to drop some interesting nuggets in this conversation. So here we go.
Yo, what's going on, guys? What is up? Party on Broad, Chalk Talk crossover, guys. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to smash that subscribe button. If you love the Eagles, give this video a like, hit those notification bells so you don't miss any of our Eagles content. Joining me is the host of Chalk Talk. He's over there. He is Shane Half at half_TPL. Good night. What's going on, Shane?
It never fails to impress me that you point the right direction because I always get that backwards.
All right, guys, we are breaking down Jalen Hurts tonight, and we're bringing you the best of the best. He is Mark Schofield. Follow him on Twitter at Mark Schofield. What's up, Mark?
What's going on, boys? Great to be with you. And like Shane, look, I can't do the point then. I can do up and down. But see, not pointing at my name. Yep, there's my name right there. Yep, there we go. Yep, right there. I could not be a weather person, like a TV weather person who's on camera. Like I'll be like, there's a massive storm system coming through New England, and I'll be like pointing to Seattle. Like it would just be an absolute mess. So, but yeah, happy to be here. Happy to talk some Eagles. Excited to get into it.
Yeah, like there's been some good, some bad, some ugly from Jalen Hurts. Let's dive right in. We had you on POB before the season started, and you were like cautiously optimistic about Jalen Hurts. I think you're like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 that he is a franchise quarterback. We have some more data to kind of know what Jalen Hurts is and what he could be. How is your view of Jalen Hurts evolved for the first 8 weeks of the season, man?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still optimistic in a sense. It's more of a reserved optimism. There have been some things that I've seen over the past, the first 8 weeks of the season that have been good. I talking about it on the QB Factory reboot with Rachel Prevet over at BGN. A lot of the game script situations, like the scripted 15 and stuff like that. I know during the broadcast on Sunday, the Fox team put that up. Like he's been really good, like 3 touchdown passes on those sort of scripted 15 situations. He's looked great in those moments. He's looked good, say in like fourth quarter situations, sometimes when they're down and they have to get back into it. He's certainly athletic. He could certainly throw well on the move. I've been impressed at times with the deep ball, the touch on downfield throws, but there are some things that are holding me back that I think, in a sense, are reasons that he's not developing the way you'd like to see. I know, look, I'm not treading new ground here, right? His pocket management. There are moments when he's got clean pockets and he bails, and you'd like to see him step up in the pocket, stay in the pocket, work through reads, work through progressions. Now, look, it's a double-edged sword with athletic quarterbacks, right? Because up until this point, up until he got to the NFL, Jalen Hurts, 9 times out of 10, was the most athletic person on the field. So if he didn't like the way something was looking, he could pull the football down, run around a little bit, and he's going to get to the edge. He's going to pick up yardage with it. The problem is now when you're going up against some of the guys that you see on the other side of the ball, the Randy Gregorys of the world, the Von Millers of the world, guys that are athletic enough to get to the edge with you and sometimes beat you to the edge, that's going to be a problem. And so it also, when you're trying to read a concept full field, but then you just bail to the right, you've cut the field in half. You're not going to bail to the right, throw back to the left to the other sideline unless you're, say, Patrick Mahomes. And even he struggles with that this year. And so, there are some pocket management things where I think he still needs improvement there. Now, generally speaking, I think he could still become, a franchise quarterback in the NFL. The talent is still there. The other issue for reservation is this. We are talking about a team that in all likelihood will have 2-3 picks in the top 10, depending on what they end up getting from Indy. And it's going to be hard for this organization to say pass on a quarterback, right? You have 3 picks in that top 10, even if you use or say it's like 2 picks in the top 10 and one in like the top 15, this might be a draft cycle where you could grab somebody in the top 15 out of the third of those 3 picks and take a swing at quarterback. They might do that. And then you start thinking about, well, draft capital expenditure, who's going to get more of a chance to succeed? The guy you took in the second round a couple of years ago, or the guy you just drafted in the first round? You're going to want to make that guy you drafted in the first round work. And so, another reason for my hesitation is he might not get the full shot at like a second year in a Nick Sirianni system because of the allure of drafting that quarterback. And so, it is tempered somewhat. It's not like he's come out and blown the doors off. There are some things that he does well that get me excited, but there are still some things that give me some pause. And then you have the draft capital issue, which may come into play this spring.
Go ahead, Shane.
Yeah. So I know when I watch the games, it's kind of hard for me sometimes to evaluate. You've got a young wide receiver room. You've got a first-time play caller / head coach and Nick Sirianni. You've got an inexperienced quarterback, and sometimes it's hard to figure out. You can look at it and see the offense isn't working, but what's the cause and what's the effect? Is Jalen Hurts struggling because the game plan is bad? Is Jalen Hurts struggling because the receivers don't get open? Or are all those things a symptom of Jalen Hurts? And so the question I want to put to you is, out of those 3 things, the play calling, the quarterback, and the receivers, which one of those are you most concerned about for the Eagles, and which one are you least concerned about?
I mean, honestly, the one I'm most concerned about right now is the sort of the play call, the offensive philosophy, the offensive identity, and it does seem like they did some things right against the Detroit Lions on Sunday. You saw some more under center stuff. You saw some, designed run stuff that, some play action stuff that make me feel a little bit better that Sirianni is perhaps evolving a bit as a play caller and starting to figure out, okay, these are the things that this offense can do well right now. These are the things that maybe we don't do good enough to really keep in the playbook, keep in the script. And so that's an issue that I think over the course of the season so far, I feel like every week Rachel and I open our show, we're like, what is the offensive identity here? Like what is their game plan? And I know, look, I think Sirianni tried to structure the offense / the run game with a very sort of heavy RPO influence, right? Because that's something that Hurts is familiar with. That's something that, could be effective to get defenders into conflict. That's something you can use to sort of rely on Hurts and his athleticism. But defenses have done a very good job against the Eagles and just league wide at making those looks cloudy pre-snap, whether it's Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, whether it's, you look at the Buffalo Bills, they've had some issues on RPOs this year, and Josh Allen, because defenses are really doing a good job of taking that 6th or 7th defender and making it quite unclear where he's going to be. And a lot of these RPOs, they're pre-snap box count reads, right? Do we have a light box? We'll run it. Do we have a heavy box? We'll throw it. Well, when that overhang defender's kind of making that look muddy, he's going to put you in a position where wherever decision you make might end up being wrong, which flips the script of the RPO, right? The RPO is designed to, whatever the defense does, you're going to make them wrong. Defenses have figured out how to cloud that. So Sirianni has gone through that and worked through that. I think, generally speaking, I think I'm least concerned about Hurts because he's a young quarterback. He's a young quarterback in now his 4th offense in 4 years. And so I do think you need to temper expectations. I know there's a lot of people saying he should have figured it out by now. It's his 4th offense in 4 years. Going back to Alabama, 1 year in Lincoln Riley, last year with Doug Peterson, now 4th offense in 4 years. That is a lot of turnover. And so, look, I think he's got to obviously get better at things, but I do think that, some patience there is still required. Now, does he get that patience? Does he get that window that gets us to back what I was just saying? And then in the middle, there's the receiver issue. I think there are moments when, look, it seems like they've got receivers that can get open, that can make plays. And then there are some other moments where it's like they're not coming through for him. That's kind of the middle ground one for me.
All right. The Eagles sit at 3-5. We're at the midway point of the season. The schedule's going to get a little easier. They've got 5 divisional games coming down the stretch here. What are your expectations for the rest of the Eagles season? And I just want to add one thing on top of that. Do you think that we're leaning towards having enough evidence of what we should do with Jalen Hurts by the end of this season?
I mean, yeah, I think, that's the reason why over the past couple of weeks, I've kind of pushed back on the idea that you should bench Hurts, that you should go to Minshew, that you should, go to Joe Flacco or whatever it is you wanted to do. Now, obviously, they traded Flacco, but I still don't think that you have enough right now to evaluate Hurts to fully make that decision. You need to figure that out. Now, maybe, by Thanksgiving, depending on how the rest of these, upcoming games play out. And there are, like you said, Crocky, there are some winnable games here. I mean, there are some winnable games for this team coming up. Now, look, Chargers, they're coming east. They just lost to the New England Patriots. Broncos seem to be in full-on seller mode. They just traded Von Miller. Saints, they look pretty good. Obviously, they just beat Tampa Bay. Then you get a Giants team that's been struggling, a Jets team that's been struggling, a Washington team that's been struggling, and the Giants again, and then Washington. This is a winnable slate of games. Now, is it enough to maybe make a run into the playoffs? I don't know, man. I mean, the NFC is very deep right now and very talented, but maybe you get some breaks. Who knows? But I think the bigger picture is you've got to decide by the time this season is over if you have enough evidence to go back with Jalen Hurts or to go with one of those picks in the first round and address quarterback. Now, of course, the thing is this quarterback class isn't like last year's.
Exactly.
It's a very different quarterback group. Now, there's talent there. There's guys that can play. And it wouldn't surprise me if a couple of these guys that end up going early, whether it's first round or second round, end up, starters in this league. But it's a different group. And so they have to be sure with Hurts. I'm not sure there's enough there right now to say, look, we got our guy or we don't have our guy.
Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind is this, and in some of the discussion about whether or not to bench Hurts, there was an undercurrent of it's not just the quarterback we need to evaluate, it's the coach. If we sit Hurts down and we start Gardner Minshew, say, started in December, right? The season, you're not making a playoff run. You sit Hurts down. You see sort of, quote, what you have in Minshew. But it's really, what do we have in the head coach? What do we have in this coaching staff? Because if Minshew comes in and suddenly he's lighting the world on fire, well, then maybe it's a Hurts issue. But if Minshew comes in and it's the same stuff and they're the same struggles, well, that might tell you more about the coaching staff than what you had with Jalen Hurts. And so, there's something to be said for that approach, but I still think it's too early. I still think that you got to get into December. You've got to get another 5-6 games or so from Jalen Hurts before you can really say, all right, we've given him basically a full season now in this offense, and it's either working and we feel comfortable or it's not working and we got to go in a different direction.
So you mentioned, obviously this year's quarterback class isn't nearly as deep as far as we can tell right now as last year's. So in hindsight, did the Eagles make the right call trading up for Devonta Smith? I mean, they could have stood pat at 12. You had Justin Fields falling down the boards, Mac Jones there. With hindsight, in mind, what would you have done?
I mean, look, sitting here right now after week 8, I would have drafted Mac Jones. I mean, it's easy to say that right now, but in the moment, I still think the idea of adding a playmaker because you were, going to give Jalen Hurts an opportunity to, prove that he's the guy. I think adding a playmaker to that offense made some sense. The thing about quarterback classes is they change. They change in a hurry. We were, when the Eagles got into that room to make those decisions, whatever their evaluations were on the guys that were left, Fields and Jones, maybe they just did not like those guys. And it's possible. Look, Fields was a polarizing prospect. Mac Jones was certainly a polarizing prospect. Maybe they were looking at it like, look, we've got an opportunity to grab a playmaker that we think could start right away. But these two guys are quarterbacks that we don't feel comfortable with. And maybe they thought, look, we're going to have Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell. So if we miss out on these guys and we need to go quarterback, you got those two guys, right? They're going to be surefire prospects. Sam Howell has been, a guy that's been talked about as a first overall pick since his freshman year. Rattler's a stud, right? So we'll dip in to the quarterback market next season. Well, look at it now, kids. Rattler's been benched, and Sam Howell, maybe he's still talented, but he's now like a fringe top 5 QB. The quarterback market and move and board has really shifted the ground underneath these kids. And so it's a much different class. And so they had to make a bet in the moment that the talent that, like, say, Devonta Smith offered immediately was a better proposition for them, both in the short term and the long term, than the two quarterbacks that were left in the first round. That was the pick they made. Hindsight sitting here, yeah, you would have liked to have perhaps drafted Mac Jones, but it's not like Jones was this surefire guy. He was the quarterback that was slotted that everybody was saying there's no way he should be drafted in the top 3 or whatever. And so it's easy to sit here right now and say, yeah, they made the wrong move, but I think in the moment it was probably the right decision.
Have you had any chance to look at Malik Willis yet out of Liberty?
Yes. Yeah.
What's your quick take on that guy?
Very athletic, has one of the best arms in this class, if not the best arm in this class, maybe one of the best arms in recent memory. He had a throw up the seam on a dagger concept this past week that it was one of those moments where it just melted down Twitter for the next 25 minutes. It was just an incredible throw. And I wrote about it on Saturday night over at USA Today that when he gets drafted, whenever that is, you're going to see that throw. He's very talented, somewhat raw, does like to run around a little bit, does like to break the pocket a little bit when he should hand in there. Does that remind you of anybody we just got done talking about? He's had some bad games this year. He had back-to-back 3 interception games, one against Middle Tennessee State, then 2 weeks ago against ULM. So it's a similar discussion to Trey Lance, and that there's no denying the talent. And his ceiling might be huge. His ceiling might be like, I don't know, a Cam Newton type ceiling. We're going to get this incredible athlete at the position. But the floor might scare some people away. The floor might be, are you going to take, the 3rd overall pick in the draft, the 6th overall pick in the draft, and draft him knowing the boom bust potential that is there? Now, you might still feel comfortable doing it. You might feel a bit more comfortable if you've got 3 first-round picks using the 3rd on him. But there's no denying the talent. I think he's an incredibly talented quarterback, has a great arm, but the team that drafts him is going to have a plan in place, a developmental path in place. You're going to need, I think, that bridge quarterback to sort of get to him, because I don't think he's somebody that, again, sitting here right now, you could envision starting right away week 1. So you might need a Hurts or a veteran or somebody else, a Gardner Minshew even, to sort of bridge the gap to him.
Yeah, Yeah, go ahead, Shane.
So don't take this as a knock on Malik, because I was very high on this guy too. But does he remind you a little bit of Paxton Lynch? Just that big arm. He's got the mobility, raw, that physical.
I mean, yeah, Shane, there's a little bit of Lynch there. I mean, I think in watching Willis a little bit, I do get the sense that there's a better understanding of the game, the concepts of coverages and things like that. That was something that I never really got with Lynch. And then after the fact, you had, people that sat down with the people that did whiteboard stuff with him, that watched tape with him. The knowledge base wasn't quite there. I think Willis, from a conceptual standpoint, he knows reads, coverages, progressions. I get a sense that foundation is there that wasn't there with Lynch. And so I think that's going to be a good thing for Willis going forward. But I certainly think from an arm talent standpoint, an athleticism standpoint, yeah, you could see some of the similarities. And this is a guy that did go in the first round. This is a guy that some people looked at, Goff and Wentz, and said, no, Lynch, he's our guy. And I think then it gets you to the developmental standpoint, to the, do you have the coaching staff and the foundation in place around him to develop that guy if you draft him? Because I think that's what sort of failed in Denver. That didn't quite work at all.
Let's piggyback off of that. The Eagles are going to have 4 top picks in this upcoming draft, very likely. How would you prioritize that draft capital? I mean, you look at safety. McLeod is, always finds himself on that injury list. You look at Kayvon Wallace, who really hasn't impressed anybody. You look at the linebackers, there's really nothing there. Edge rusher, they need to bring in a bona fide starter. How would you, your GM, Howie Roseman, how would you prioritize all of that, especially the top picks?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Crocky, this is a draft where trenches, secondary, obviously pass rushers. I mean, I think those are going to be the strengths of this draft. You start looking at big boards right now. You start looking around, other people's top 100, top 50, whatever. You really see that's where the talent seems to be. And so, how early do you want to draft a safety? Because look, Kyle Hamilton, the Notre Dame kid, I know he just got injured, but he's an extremely talented player. I mean, you watch him, I forget which game it was, but he had an interception where he was on the right hash mark and got all the way to the left sideline.
Yeah, he went across the entire field. It was awesome.
It's just an absolutely incredible play. He's like a top 5 player. Like that's how talented he is. But, we know Howie Roseman has looked at positional value. And I know in today's NFL with so many sub packages, you play a lot of safeties at times. It's an important position in my mind. But will this organization value safety high enough to use, say, the 4th, the 5th, the 3rd, however high they are, that pick on a safety? But he's certainly talented. You look at, pass rusher, the Oregon kid, like he's it. Like he's tremendous. You see, it was a couple weeks ago where he had to sit out the first half. I think it was against California. He comes in and it's just he's in the backfield snap after snap after snap, but he's got the array of pass rushing moves you want to see from a pass rusher. He's got the ability to string together pass rushing moves. He can counter, he can obviously run the arc. He's explosive, an extremely talented player. Even Hutchinson, the Michigan kid, he's a good guy off the edge. And so there's talent off the edge. I know, look, Sauce Gardner, the Cincinnati corner, Derek Stingley Jr., the LSU corner. I mean, there are some corners there. Leal, the interior defensive tackle at A&M, like he's a talented player. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see if they sort of go defense with one of those picks because those are some talented players. Then the question becomes, if they address quarterback, when do you do it? Because this is one of those drafts where, I think it was the guys over at Bleacher Report had their first like top 100 big board, Nate Tice and Justice Mosqueda and some others. And quarterback was like 25, their top quarterback, Desmond Ridder. This might be one of those drafts where you get ready for the draft. It's like the final weekend before the draft and you look at big boards and quarterbacks are like the top QBs and like the 20s or 30s, because in a vacuum, the talent might not be there. So as an organization, when do you feel if you're going to go quarterback comfortable doing that when you're going to be passing up top 20, top 15 talent to do so? Positional value might say you go draft a quarterback because it's so important, but this is going to be a weird class and a weird draft season to see how that gets sorted out for teams.
Yeah, it's this draft, just like Shane's co-host, like this draft has always been Thibodeau and Kyle Hamilton. Those are the top 2, no question. And Shane and I got in a little argument in our Discord that if the Eagles are sitting there at like 3, 4, I would 100% go all in on Thibodeau. I think that guy is just a step up, a notch up compared to everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I really think though, if you're going to draft him, you got to get to 1. I mean, I really think that's
that was our argument. That was our argument.
Would you pay the capital to get to that?
Yeah. And, if you've got 2 of the top 6 picks, you might get to 1. And, Detroit, they obviously need a quarterback. I mean, if the draft were to happen right now and Detroit's sitting there at 1, I think they got to go QB. Are they comfortable drafting one of these guys at 1-1?
True.
I don't know. I mean, so maybe you could get to 1. He's a game change type of player. I mean, that's how talented he is. But again, there's no sure thing in the NFL draft. I mean, I remember when the Dolphins traded up to get Deion Jordan because he was a game change type of pass rusher off the edge, and that didn't quite pan out. I mean, Clinton Ferrell, who was 4th overall to the Raiders. Like, guys look great on paper. I think he's the real deal, but you just never know.
This draft has a lot of really good fits for the Eagles, especially with their needs. Kyer Elam's another cornerback to throw in. George Kalafdis, another really good guy out of Purdue. Yeah. Just the exact opposite of last year's draft, where you have a ton of edge rushers that go really deep, especially in this first round. Go ahead, Shane. You're up.
So we've heard the analytics. We clicked at the same time. We've heard the analytics for years, and running backs don't matter has been splattered all over Twitter, and teams are starting to move to more pass-heavy offenses. We've seen the Eagles, prior to the game against the Lions, just have a non-existent running game. Can you get away with that? Like, how important is running the ball in the NFL? Can you just get away with throwing the ball 80-90% of the time? You got to have some semblance of balance. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think you can really – I think the simple answer is do whatever you do well, do that. I mean, that's sort of the easy answer, right? Like, you look at the Rams right now, they're just going 5 wide out of empty and letting Stafford sling it. I mean, It's not like in years past where they had to put the quarterback under center. They had to use all sorts of jet motion and play action and eye candy. They can just go back there and sling it. You look at Tennessee prior to the Derrick Henry injury. It's obviously the run game. It's play action, but you do some stuff downfield in the passing game. So whatever it is that you do well, do that. I think what's important in terms of the debate, do running backs matter? Do you need a good run game to run play action? Your play action concepts have to look like your run concepts. Like I think that's really the critical thing, right? So if your run game is very much, under center, stuff like that, and then you try to run RPO or play action out of the gun, you're not going to sell anybody on it. Like your play action concepts have to look like your run game concepts. That's something I think Tennessee does extremely well, right? So much of their run game stuff is under center, split zone, counter, gap power, duo, but their play action stuff looks the exact same. They're not changing it. Like if you're a heavy team that runs out of the gun, don't line up under center to run play action. You're not fooling everybody. Like, because a lot of times when you're trying to get those linebackers to drive downhill, they're not reading the backfield. They're reading the center. They're reading the guards. Like, if they see guards pulling, if they see centers fanning out, if they see hats down, like their drive block, and that's their run key, that's what's going to get them downhill. And so if it doesn't look like run to them from that perspective, you're not going to get that big throwing window behind them. And so, long answer short, I think whatever you do well, do that. I know that's an easy cop-out answer, but in terms of the run game specifically, you don't need to be a team that's getting 5 yards per pop to then be successful in the play action passing game. You just need your run concepts and your play action concepts to look similar enough to really get those linebackers to drive downhill, to even get safeties to come flying down in the box at times, because if you're not fooling them from a run key standpoint, you're not going to be successful on play action.
Awesome stuff, man. Mark, thank you for joining yet again. Thank you so much. Again, lastly, where can we find you, man? What do you want to plug? Time is yours, man. Well,
guys, thanks so much for having me. Always love coming on. Huge fan of you guys. And I like them. I don't know if it was for this show, but the new video intro it was very nice to see the little highlight splash package there. On the Bird app, on Twitter, if I do this right, there we go. Nailed it. Mark Schofield on the Bird app, USA Today, bunch of SB Nation sites, but on Twitter is the best way to find me.
Thank you, Mark. And that is over there, my man Shane. He is at @half_TPL. Thank you guys for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. For Shane, for Mark, for myself, catch you next time. Stay awesome, everybody.
And we are back. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Mark. Be sure you give him a follow on Twitter @Mark Schofield. He does great breakdowns of quarterbacks every single week. His go-to series is 3 Throws with Sco, where he breaks down 3 throws from almost every quarterback in the league. You'll learn a lot about the quarterback position if you check that out. So let's get into it. The Eagles have a dominating win, 44-6 over the Detroit Lions. You guys saw this game. It was a get-right game for the Eagles, we hope. A game that they dominated in the trenches just from start to finish. The Eagles came into the game. They rushed the ball 46 times for 236 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, and 4 touchdowns. The 4 touchdowns that the Eagles rushed for in week 8 is more than their total combined rushing touchdowns in weeks 1 through 7 when they had 3. Jalen Hurts was efficient, 9 of 14 passing for 103 yards, 7.4 yards per attempt. He was not asked to do a lot through the air, but he was the team's leading rusher with 71 rushing yards. The defense made some adjustments for the first time, it feels like, since week 1. They had a pressure rate of 46.2%, which was 14% higher than their previous high. And watching the game, you came away feeling like the pass rush may not have been the problem this year. It might have been the defensive scheme behind it. The Eagles got more aggressive. They played some man coverage. They stopped giving up just those easy checkdowns underneath, and they just dominated this game in the trenches. You look, TJ Hawkinson was the leading receiver for the Lions with 89 yards on 10 receptions. And outside of that, they really didn't have a lot. There weren't explosive plays. They gave up one 34-yard pass. But beyond that, the defense played really well. They locked down the running game, and they got a lot of pressure. We had 6 sacks on the day. Josh Sweat gets 2 sacks early in the game. He almost comes away with a third. It was just a dominating performance for the defense. Now, it's important to remember this is the Detroit Lions. They're winless, and they're winless for a reason. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL. But they've shown some fight in previous weeks. They took the Ravens to the brink. It took a Justin Tucker record-length field goal after a conversion on 4th and 23 by Lamar Jackson for the Ravens to beat the Lions. The Lions have been competitive. The wheels just really came off this week. You saw a heavy under center rushing attack from the Eagles. And you saw that at the beginning of last week's game against the Raiders before Miles Sanders gets hurt. And then all of a sudden the Eagles are down by 3 scores. And so they sort of had to abandon that game. And so we'll see moving forward into next week if this is a new mentality for the Eagles, if this is the new offensive identity that they're going to cling to, is more under center rushing, less RPOs, less of an emphasis on the passing game. And we'll see if they can do that against a team that is not the Lions. But the Eagles get a win. It's a win you can feel good about. The first time you can really walk away on a Sunday and feel good about a game since the week 1 matchup with the Falcons. So moving on, let's throw it around the NFL here. We have the Thursday night game, the Green Bay Packers traveling to the Arizona Cardinals. And I don't have that score pulled up, but we'll still talk about it. This game had a wild ending. I don't know if you were watching this game, but if you didn't, you missed a treat. With 4 minutes and 46 seconds left in the game, up by a field goal, Aaron Jones scores a touchdown for the Packers to make it a 10-point game. But it's reviewed, and on review, it was overturned. They said he's short of the end zone. The Packers didn't have a timeout left, and they didn't get the play in time, so they take a delay of game that pushes them back. And then 2 plays later, they make a decision to go for it on a 4th down. The Aaron Rodgers pass is batted down at the line of scrimmage, and they turn it over at the 1-yard line. And so the Cardinals have 3 minutes left. They need a field goal to get to overtime or a touchdown to win. And they march all the way down the field. Kyler Murray makes some electric plays. They get all the way down to the Green Bay 5-yard line. And then Kyler Murray throws an interception in the end zone, targeting A.J. Green. You need to look this play up if you haven't seen it. He gets quick pressure and he just throws it up. Green is locked one-on-one with his corner, but he never looks for the ball. It's like he never expected a pass to come his way. NFL memes put out a tweet where the Madden your controller disconnected thing pops up on the screen. And I don't know what happened there. It was a major miscommunication. It costs the Cardinals the game. And so the Cardinals get their first loss of the year. Now, should we be worried about the Cardinals? No, the Green Bay Packers, they are an NFC contender, maybe one of the front runners. And so it goes all the way down to the wire. It takes this weird miscue. If you play this game 10 times, Arizona probably wins it 5 times. This was an evenly matched game. It was an exciting game to watch and a potential NFC title preview. Randall Cobb gets 2 receiving touchdowns on the day. Aaron Rodgers, he's hooking his guy up. He had the statement earlier. He's got the feud with Brian Gutekunst, the GM for the Packers, and he forces the issue with the trade for Randall Cobb. And we talked about earlier on this podcast earlier in the year, you wonder if he is just going to feed the ball to Randall Cobb in the red zone to make a point. It certainly looks like that could be the case. And Aaron Rodgers is just petty enough to do it, and he's good enough to pull it off. And so something to continue to monitor. Randall Cobb, though, gets 2 touchdowns in this game. One of the big negative factors for the Cardinals in this game was Deandre Hopkins. He leaves the game early with an injury. He was in and out of the lineup. He ends up with 66 yards receiving, much to the detriment of my fantasy team that scored a season low. And so the Packers pick up a big win, a win that they needed. Arizona picks up their first loss of the year. And they need to get back on track next week, as they play in a very loaded division with the Rams, who just made a big move that we will talk about momentarily. So moving on, we have the Cincinnati Bengals at the New York Jets. The Cincinnati Bengals, they are coming off of a win of the Ravens. We talked about last week on this podcast. They may be the favorite in their division, and then they have an awful letdown game against the Jets. They lose to the Mike White-led Jets 34-31. Mike White gets the start after Zack Wilson is out for a few weeks with an injury. The Jets go and trade for Joe Flacco, but they start Mike White this week, and something tells me that they might be starting Mike White again next week. And what happened in this game, if you didn't watch it, Mike White just took the check down. Cincinnati plays more of a soft coverage, that split field safety look, and it was exploited because Mike White was willing to throw the ball to his running back, and Zack Wilson's not necessarily willing to do that. Zack Wilson wants to make the big play. He wants to scramble around, be out of structure, try to make these explosive plays. Well, Mike White didn't do that. Mike White targeted Michael Carter, his running back, 14 times in the passing game. He had 9 receptions for 95 yards, and the Bengals just didn't adjust on defense. The game plan that they had would have been good against Zack Wilson, but Zack Wilson wasn't playing. And this wasn't an injury that was occurred, in the game. They knew that Mike White was going to be the starter. And so it's a little bit unforgivable for the Bengals to have been so slow to adjust this here. You had to know that backup quarterbacks are typically going to come in and be more check down heavy. There was a critical first half sequence where the Bengals had 1st and goal on the 1 yard line, and the Jets are able to hold them out of the end zone. And it really changed the course of the game. They dropped Joe Mixon in the backfield on 1st and 2nd down. And then Jamar Chase dropped a pass in the end zone. It should have been a touchdown, but it wasn't. And then on 4th down, the Bengals decided to go for it, and Joe Burrow takes a sack. So it led to a turnover on downs. And it really felt like the Bengals just didn't recover from that. They got boat raced by the Jets. They were not planning on a game like this. Jamar Chase has a rough day. He's got 3 receptions for 32 yards. He does pick up the touchdown, but he was targeted 9 times and he dropped another touchdown. Joe Mixon was held in check, 14 carries for 33 yards, 2.4 yard average. The story of the day for the Jets is rookie running back Michael Carter. This is a guy that I loved during the draft process, and he had a huge day. He had 77 yards rushing and a touchdown on the ground, averaged 5.1 yards per carry, and he was the team's leading receiver. And so Michael Carter, he's probably going to be a good option for you if you're in a fantasy league. If you could pick this guy up, as long as Mike White's a starter, he's going to have a chance to play. Now, is this game a referendum on Zack Wilson? I don't think so. The owner after the game said, we'll just see. He didn't commit to Zack Wilson being the starter when he comes back, but Zack Wilson's going to start when he comes back. He was the number 2 overall pick. He's a guy that you traded up for. You're playing him when he comes back. You're not going to scrap this guy over 7 games that were struggles on a roster this bad. Wilson was always going to struggle in this transition. He's a guy who liked to play out of structure, and the structure that the Jets have just isn't good. Their offensive line is bad. They don't have a lot of playmakers. And so for a guy that wants to extend plays and hold on to the ball, it was going to be a rough transition. Now, I'm not in on Zack Wilson. He was one of my least favorite quarterbacks in the draft process this year. But what we've seen so far, it's not a referendum on him. So Jets fans, you can hold off on the panic and hold off on the Mike White hype. I highly doubt that he's going to have the same level of success again next week. Let's move on to the Tennessee Titans against the Indianapolis Colts, a game that went to overtime. And this was a game that, and you saw the entire Carson Wentz experience in this game in a very truncated period. With a tie game near the end, the Colts have the ball in the shadow of their own goal line. Carson Wentz is under pressure and he's getting hit, and he tries to pump fake, and then he tries to backhand toss the ball towards a running back, and it leads to a pick six. And so now all of a sudden the Colts are down, but then he bounces back and he leads a game tying drive. He underthrows a deep ball horribly that leads to a pass interference. He ends up getting the ball into the end zone, and he gets it to overtime. On overtime, the Colts get the ball, and Carson Wentz on a 1st and 10 with his running back standing 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, wide open, nobody else on the screen. The all 22 shows the nearest person is a safety about 20 yards downfield. So hit the check down, 10 to 15 yards, you pick up a 1st down. Instead, he tries to yeet a throw into triple coverage on 1st down. It gets intercepted, and the Titans kick the field goal to win the game. The sad thing about Carson Wentz is he's such a talented player, and he's a player that you just cannot trust with the game on the line. Ever. Are you ever going to feel comfortable with this guy? He could play clean for a whole game. He can look good. And then he's just going to freak out in a critical moment. He won't let a play die. He's going to try to make some superhuman play. You hate to see it because he's such a talented player, but until he learns to let a play die, it's always going to be a struggle. The Colts have a questionable approach in this game. They ask Wentz to throw the ball 51 times. They only give Jonathan Taylor 16 carries. He was coming off of a tear over the last couple of games. And I'm not bitter about it because I had the over 75 rushing yard bet line at all. But Jonathan Taylor, they needed to get him more involved, especially since they had an early lead. Tennessee is down 14-0 early in the game after Tannehill throws a pick on his first pass, but the Titans battled back. They overcome 161 yards in penalties, which is just insane. Derrick Henry was largely ineffective, 28 carries for 68 yards, 2.4 yards per carry. We found out after the game he was playing injured, and now he's on IR and he may be done for the season. And so the question for the Titans becomes who picks up the slack. It's not going to be another running back. There isn't another Derrick Henry. This is going to have to become a more fleshed out passing attack. And you saw Ryan Tannehill. He played well in spots in this game. The 2 interceptions you would like to see not happen. But overall, the Titans are going to have to begin relying more on their passing attack in the absence of Derrick Henry. So let's move on to our next game. It is the Los Angeles Rams against the Houston Texans in a game that essentially became like a mini bye for the Rams. They were up 38-0 at the start of the fourth quarter. And people that weren't watching this game, you saw the Texans start to come back in the fourth quarter. It's like, what is going on? But the Rams were playing backups. The Texans scored 22 in the fourth quarter. It's still not a close game. The Rams allowed under 100 yards of offense from the Texans in the whole first 3 quarters combined. Davis Mills, his stats look okay if you look at him, but it was all in the fourth quarter. He had a dreadful game. And the Rams are now 7-1. They're now tied for the division lead with the Cardinals' loss. And they essentially had a mini bye week as they rest their starters for the entire fourth quarter as they get ready to head into week 9. Up next, we've got the Steelers at the Browns in what became the Joe Schobert revenge game. Joe Schobert, linebacker for the Steelers, who previously played for the Browns. He forces a fumble in the fourth quarter that stopped the Browns' best chance to retake the lead. And so Joe Schobert gets revenge on his previous team. A rookie tight end, Pat Freiermuth, made an unbelievable catch for a touchdown in this game. If you have not seen the highlight here, you need to go find that. Go look it up. It's one of the more impressive catches you'll see this year, particularly from a rookie tight end. But it's the only time that the Steelers put the ball in the end zone on the day. But they end up winning 15-10. This was also kind of a bizarre game. Mike Tomlin calls a trick play that gets his kicker, Chris Boswell, laid out, and then they're without a kicker moving forward. And so there was a bizarre 2-point conversion attempt where Ben Roethlisberger scores on a draw. It's called back on a holding. And then from the 12-yard line, they still have to go for it and just gets instant pressure off the left side. And he throws a check down behind the line of scrimmage. He got roasted for that on social media. I don't know what you want him to do. He was getting hit at like 1.5 seconds. He just put the ball up there, gave somebody maybe a chance, but Pittsburgh holds on to win this game. The offensive line, despite what I just said about the left tackle, they're starting to play a little better. They only give up 2 sacks on the day. They didn't give up a ton of pressure. They got the run game going a little bit. Najee Harris has 91 rushing yards. This is how the Steelers are going to have to play to win games. They're going to have to run the ball. Ben Roethlisberger's not able to push the ball downfield anymore. He can still check the ball down some. That was never his strong suit, though. So they're going to have to lean on this defense and this rushing attack if they want to make a run. And so they sit at 4-3 right now. They've got to continue to get better on the offensive line. Meanwhile, on the Browns side, again, injuries are killing this team. Baker Mayfield is playing banged up. He's killing his chances for a contract extension. He really needs to sit out and he needs to get healthy. He's not effective in this game. Neither is the Cleveland rushing attack, as the Steelers defense holds Nick Chubb to 61 yards, rushing 3.8 yards per attempt. Myles Garrett notched another sack in this game. That's 10.5 sacks through 8 games on the year. If you extend that out to a 17-game season, he is on pace for 22.4 sacks. 22.5 sacks is the NFL record. And so he's got an extra game over the record there. And we'll see if he's able to continue at this clip. But we could be looking at, if he continues to play at this level, him pushing for the NFL sack record in week 17. Moving on to the San Francisco 49ers at the Chicago Bears. A game that Jimmy G played really well in. And so as whispers of Trey Lance taking over when he gets back come, well, Jimmy G played one of his better games of the year. The 49ers never punted. And as sort of an ultimate, anything Trey can do, I can do better, Jimmy Garoppolo has 2 rushing touchdowns. Now, obviously, he was aided in this game by Khalil Mack being out. He was not under pressure very much, but he goes 17 of 28 passing for 322 yards. He does not throw a touchdown, but he rushes for 2. Elijah Mitchell had a day on the ground, 137 rushing yards and a touchdown. Deebo Samuel has a great game, 6 receptions for 171 yards. 83 of that came on a screen pass on a 3rd and 20 that he breaks open. He ends up getting tackled at the 1, which is just devastating to you as a receiver to then not get to put that ball in the end zone. On the flip side, this was the best game of Justin Fields' career. He goes 19 of 27 for 175 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He takes 4 sacks, and he rushes for 103 yards. Now, that stat total doesn't sound great, but if you watch the game, he played pretty well. Justin Fields is a guy who in college was one of the better deep passers in the NFL. He held the ball for a long time. And he's been asked to hit the quick game in rhythm in the pocket, and it hasn't worked. With Matt Nagy gone for the game on Sunday, the game plan changed. He was rolled out on Sunday. They gave him a lot of half-field reads or one read, and he can run if it's not there. And it worked out. He rushed for over 100 yards. He largely took care of the ball. He had a phenomenal scramble for a touchdown where he was dead in the water in the backfield, and he ends up rolling away from the whole thing. Another highlight that you need to check out. But Justin Fields looking at his best without Matt Nagy on the sideline. And the Bears have got to see this. You've got to make a move here. Get rid of Nagy. Get a better play caller in here and try to build around Justin Fields' strength and see what he can become. Up next, we have the Carolina Panthers at the Atlanta Falcons. Sam Darnold was back in this game from being benched, and he was ultimately knocked out late in the game with a concussion. He goes 13 of 24 for 129 yards. He did not look good in this game. It's safe to say that the Sam Darnold trade and subsequent extension was a poor move by the Panthers, who are definitely going to be in the market for a quarterback come this offseason. On the Atlanta side of the ball, Kyle Pitts struggled in this game with Calvin Ridley out. He ends the day with 6 targets, 2 catches for 13 yards. He had a big drop. And the game-sealing interception was made by Stephon Gilmore on a play targeting Kyle Pitts. With Calvin Ridley out, the Panthers just blanketed Pitts. They had 2 guys on him all day, and he wasn't able to win in that situation. And you shouldn't expect a rookie tight end to win in that situation. Somebody else has to step out, and nobody did for the Falcons. Matt Ryan was pressured on 56.7% of his dropbacks, and although he completed 20 out of 27 passes, he threw 2 interceptions, he took 3 sacks, and he was inefficient on the whole for the day. Up next, we have the Dolphins traveling to the Bills. I don't have this one pulled up here, but the Bills only scored 3 points in the first half. Their longest drive of the day was 35 yards in that first half. After halftime, they punted to open the third quarter, but then they scored on 4 straight drives. They finally got going. Tua played better. It was a strong defensive effort, but the Dolphins just come up short. They miss a field goal in the red zone early in the game. They had a snap fumble that hit Mike Gesicki while he was in motion. They had a strip sack. Just not a great day for the Miami offense. And the Bills, although they did not look as good as they did earlier in the year when they beat the Dolphins 35-0. They did win the game. They've got a soft game coming up against the Jags when they can try to get right. Moving on to the Patriots at the Chargers. The Patriots beat the Chargers 27-24. Justin Herbert, 18 of 35 for 223 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 3 sacks. Did not look good in this game. The 2 worst games of Justin Herbert's career in terms of completion percentage, QB rating, and completion percentage over expectation have both come against the New England Patriots. This week, he was minus 12.4% completion over expectation. So Bill Belichick has the blueprint for stopping Justin Herbert. Any team in his division ought to be on the phone with him asking what that game plan is. The Patriots made some mistakes on the day. They had a fumble 2 plays after a touchdown was called back on a penalty. They did enough, though. Mac Jones, 18 of 35 for 218 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. They're varying the offense more with him, allowing him to push it more downfield with some mixed results. But New England wins their 3rd game in the last 4 weeks, and they look to be getting on track. Next, we have the Jaguars at the Seahawks. Geno Smith completes his first 14 passes in this game. He has a plus 24.7 completion percentage over expectation, ends 20 of 24 for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Seattle defense came into this game 31st in yards per game, but they stifled the Jags. They had 22 pressures of Trevor Lawrence. They only allowed 3 passes that went over 10 yards on the day. And this Jags offense, it's just out of sorts. The Jags defense is out of sorts. This is just a bad football team. And this was the Jags off of a bye week, right? This is just not a good team. 53 pass attempts for Trevor Lawrence. He only has 238 yards. They had 12 men on the field, 2 plays in a row on offense, committed 12 penalties for 93 yards. Just a poorly coached team. The Jags aren't the most talented team, but they have more talent than they're showing. And I would say Urban Meyer has been on the hot seat all year. I doubt he makes it through this offseason. Next, we have the Washington football team at the Denver Broncos. Minus Von Miller, minus Nick Chubb, the Broncos still generated a lot of pressure on Taylor Heineke. And ultimately, they end up winning the game by 7. There's some special teams miscues for Washington. Their kicker, Chris Blewett, which is a very unfortunate name for a kicker who blew it. He was blocked for the 2nd week in a row. He had 2 kicks blocked in this game. They're going to have to make a move there. He's getting the ball out at such a low trajectory. They're being blocked without any penetration. That's on the kicker. Now, Denver tried to blow this game late. They were up 7 with 49 seconds left, and they had a 1-yard run, an incomplete pass, and then a fumble. But their defense ultimately bails them out, and they win the game. Up next, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the New Orleans Saints. Jameis Winston starts this game hot before leaving with an ACL injury that was later revealed to be season-ending. With Taysom Hill out as well, Trevor Siemian, the 3rd-string quarterback for New Orleans, comes in, and he beats Tom Brady. So Tom Brady loses to the Saints' 3rd-string quarterback. He threw his 2nd pick of the day with 1:36 left, down by 2. He was strip-sacked in this game. 4 of his last 6 meetings with Sean Payton have not gone well, including the regular season sweep last year. So whatever it is about this Saints defense, they tend to really lock down Tom Brady. Not a reason to be concerned if you're a Bucs fan. We saw this last year, but this does make the NFC South a lot more interesting, as there's now only a 1 game, or really a half game gap, because New Orleans has had their bye. So there's a half game margin between Tampa Bay and New Orleans. On to the Sunday night game, we had the Dallas Cowboys at the Minnesota Vikings, and Cooper Rush comes into this game. He's thrown 3 career passes. He leads the Cowboys to victory. He goes 24 of 40 passing for 325 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, takes 3 sacks. He did not look good in this game necessarily, but neither did Kirk Cousins. He actually puts up better numbers and a better rating than Kirk Cousins. And so there is something to the primetime Kirk, just can't get it done. And we talked about that a little bit on the preview show. Kirk Cousins and the Vikings, they go 1 of 13 on 3rd downs in this game. The Cowboys didn't really get much from their rushing attack. It really was all on the passing attack. Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb both go over 100 yards. And Cooper Rush throws the game-winning touchdown to Amari Cooper. Fun factoid, it was the first time in NFL history where a quarterback's first name and a wide receiver's last name have matched on a game-winning touchdown. So if that's on Jeopardy in a couple of years and you remember it, give us a shout out for that. We'd really appreciate that. Good publicity. And so on to the Monday night game. The Kansas City Chiefs have what should have been a get-right game against the Giants, and they barely scrape by. This is just not a good Chiefs team. This is a team I believe is going to miss the playoffs. Mahomes leads a field goal drive to win 20-17 with 1:07 left. Just not a position you should be in if you consider yourself a contender against the Giants. Mahomes started hot, and then he threw an interception on the first drive. It bounced off his receiver's face mask. I don't know how that happens, but it did. He ends the day 29 of 48 passing. On passes that traveled less than 9 yards in the air, he completed 92%. But over 10 yards, he was at 33%. So they really struggled throwing the ball downfield, despite having Tyreek Hill, who was targeted 18 times. He ends up with 12 receptions, 94 yards, only one reception over 15 yards. Travis Kelce continues to struggle. He was targeted 7 times. He ends up with 27 yards and a fumble. On the other side of the ball, the Giants, Daniel Jones, he throws a pick on the first pass of the game. It's as if he saw Mahomes throw the interception. He's like, anything you can do, I can do better. He was conservative for the rest of the game. He took his checkdowns. Sterling Shepard and Kadarius Toney both played, both coming off of injuries. They both left the game again with injuries. Kenny Golladay was out with injuries. And so this is a banged up offense, but this is a horrible Chiefs defense. And Daniel Jones did not look the part. They didn't have much of a rushing attack. Just an all-around bad game on both sides. It comes down to a final field goal, but it was not a pleasurable game to watch. And really a referendum on both teams. The Giants are just a bad team, and time has to be running out on Dave Gettleman. Meanwhile, the Chiefs, this just is not their year. You know, they could get on a run. They could go do something here, but I'm not anticipating it. Patrick Mahomes looks more mortal this year. A more mortal Patrick Mahomes is still one of the better quarterbacks in the league, but he simply can't cover up the deficiencies on this defense. And he can't carry, this lack of a rushing attack. And if they really need Travis Kelce to get back on track if they want a chance to make a run here. That's going to about wrap it up. Thank you for joining me for this solo edition of Chalk Talk. We will be back later in this week for a normal preview show, but I wanted to get something out to you guys, even if it was in a little bit different format. So thank you for joining for episode 21 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode that'll go live later this week, and you can join us and you can drop us comments that we'll put on the show. Please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. You can follow my co-host Mark Henry Jr. at Mark Henry Jr. So for me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.